One of us happens to have a girlfriend who is all strung out on opiates.
I remember where on on the outskirts of town.
Okay.
Hey, we're streaming live on YouTube.
Streaming or screaming?
Maybe a little bit of both. Maybe a little bit of both.
We're going to start in 1 minute. It's a 1 minute countdown.
1 minute, Roger.
Well, why can't we banter for the people?
Well, because sometimes our bantering makes me have to do some edits.
La Raza, you need a no sempre vancará.
Specifically of where some people live.
Oh, wait a minute. I don't understand that.
Not everybody always wants people to know where they live. Because
I don't know where anyone lives.
we know where Lewis lives.
That's why I live in the mountains.
And Lewis lives in Los Feliz. Anyways, it's our time, guys. You ready?
Yeah.
Let's hit it.
I want to welcome everybody
Lord be
back.
with you all the way.
I want to welcome everybody back to the world according to Ben Stein. I want to thank everybody that's listening and following us on YouTube right now at the world according to Ben Stein. Remind people you could find us at the world according to Ben Stein on Facebook. And of course, you could find Ben on Parler, where he's crossed the 150,000 mark at Ben Stein. And I want to thank everybody for helping us get there. And also remind everybody, tell your friends,
Thank you.
Subscribe, like us. But of course, let's welcome to the show the other Ben, managing editor of American Greatness, Ben Boychuk. How are you tonight, Ben?
Doing very well. Thanks, Judah. It's always great to be here.
And I want to tell you the number one question I get off air about you is people think your name is either made up. Your last name is, because they think it means good boy in Yiddish. But I keep on telling them you're not. You might look it, but you are not.
I'm
Full-blooded Aryan.
Full-blooded Aryan. And and of course, our resident esoteric historian. I don't want to say Nixon anymore since Ben disputed that the other day.
No, I didn't dispute it. I said I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
But okay, so Nixon historian and Mr. Esoteric himself, Lewis. Fine. How are you, Lewis?
Doing well.
Power to the people. And of course, as always, America's humble servant, economist, lawyer, teacher, lover, sinner,
Actor,
healer, actor, father, husband,
lover.
Mr. Benjamin Jeremy Stein. We salute you, Mr. Stein. And as we were going through show topics, one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight, and we discussed before, was I want to go through this first because everybody, as Ben Stein knows, I am one of Donald Trump's biggest supporters from day one. I was on the Trump train. But I also think, Mr. Benjamin Jeremy Stein, Donald Trump goes by his gut. And the biggest mistake he made, I truly believe in the bottom of my heart, is he didn't listen to his gut when it came to COVID.
I think that's absolutely right.
He was going through impeachment. Mm-hmm. He didn't listen to his gut, and he listened to scientists, and that was one of his fatal mistakes.
Well, people think that science is scientific, but it isn't. Science is political. Science is about opinions, hopes, wishes, prejudices. And yes, his gut is incredibly intelligent, and he should have followed his gut and realized that this whole thing had been overhyped insanely, and that we did not need to go crazy about it. But then the media, of course, encouraged him to go crazy. Media went crazy. Sells, what does it say? If it bleeds, it leads. If it coughs, it leads. I guess that doesn't rhyme. But anyway, he made a big mistake. He did at the beginning say it's not going to be a terrible catastrophe, but the media made it into a terrible catastrophe.
So I ask you this question because I ask you a bunch of questions, but as they say, the cure is worse than the disease. We don't even know that what the response was actually the cure, right? I mean, at the end, in the beginning, it was just to what's the word, Ben Boychuk, to the curve. So
Flatten the curve.
Flatten the curve.
you
Yeah,
flatten the
flatten the
curve so
curve.
hospitals wouldn't be inundated, Ben Stein. Do you think
No,
we're ever
flatten the
going to?
curve.
But do you think we're ever going to know if if that was the right thing, or we're just going to be?
Yes, I think eventually they will take the virus up against the wall, slap the hell out of it, get it to confess. No, I don't think we know how serious the disease was. I mean, it's a disease, that's for sure. It's not all a good thing. I sure don't want to have it. I don't want anyone I love to have it. But the number of fatalities from it, unless there's a comorbidity factor, is quite small. And I believe you, my very dear friend, pointed out that when a person is healthy, like a football player, if he gets it, he always recovers. And without the comorbidity, it's just not that bad. And yet we've turned the whole country upside down, and people are really, really suffering because of the shutdowns.
Yeah, I could have, before I go to Ben Budzik, just to follow up on that, I brought up the NFL players. The NFL's had an abundance of players test positive. More players are out of the season because of tearing of knee injuries than they are because of COVID. I think almost, if I'm not mistaken, almost every single player that in the NFL that tested positive for COVID has come back. But Ben Budzik, I go to you with the same question about do you think this was one of Trump's biggest mistakes?
I do, and I was trying to locate the full quote from Bob Woodward's latest book, which caused a great stir just ahead of the election. Book called Rage, and maybe Lewis can find it. I saw it earlier, and I didn't save it, but there was a big hue and cry over the revelation in the book where Trump said, to be honest with you, I always wanted to play it down. I wanted to play it down because I don't want to cause a panic. But the full context of the quote was, and I think this is something that everybody missed, was that, he told Woodward, and he shouldn't have talked to Woodward at all, but he told Woodward,
absolutely.
He said, we're a great country. We're a strong country. I don't want people to be afraid. I want them to take it seriously, but I don't want to cause a panic either. He was acknowledging that, yeah, he has a responsibility as president of the United States to be a cheerleader for the country. And I think that's what he was trying to do. And I don't think he fully understood. He clearly didn't fully understand when he spent all that time talking to Bob Woodward, Ben Stein, that he was going to get screwed, and why he did it.
Who has ever spent a lot of time talking to Bob Woodward who didn't get screwed?
Exactly. And so I actually want to know, Ben, it's one thing because Trump and the White House gave Woodward a whole lot of access for a book that came out 2 years ago. Why would you do that twice?
I know it was unbelievably stupid. I don't know why they did it. I really have no idea why they did it. And he's, to me, Bob Woodward is a very bad guy. Other people feel quite differently about him, obviously. So, but it was a terrible mistake. But then once the media had smelled blood, they went crazy, demanding that America go into a panic about it.
But don't you think it's interesting that, I wish I had the direct quote in front of me, but at the full context of the
feeling
quote,
that Lewis is getting it right now.
I hope so. But I got it really tells us something about just the world in which we're living, right? That CNN and the Washington Post cherry picked what he said, but the full paragraph actually puts Trump in a much better light, I think.
I think everything Trump has ever said in full paragraph is very different than what exactly he said. And but let's get to Lewis, who's been a little silent. And what are your take on that? Was that a monstrous mistake by Trump?
I don't know if it was a monstrous mistake, but the quote here's what
knew it.
Woodward said to Trump in their colloquy. Mr. President, in doing this research concerning the outbreak of COVID-19, please understand that I have no intention of quoting you in full, and the publication of my book, tentatively titled Rage, will be to my benefit, not yours. I have a reputation of manufacturing quotes in part or whole, including the entirety of my novel, Veil, about the late William Casey, director of the Central Intelligence Agency. If you think this story will be favorable to you, you are, in the non-clinical sense of the word, crazy. So that's the full quote. That's the full quote.
Good job, Louis.
And
Louis, that is absolutely great.
I'm just reading from the transcripts. I fear the scientists less than I do the political scientists, because they are the ones who have politicized science far beyond whatever disputes exist, and they do exist among scientists, academic and non-academic alike. And the problem is there was cooperation throughout the country, or a large degree of cooperation, until, and this is one of those things you can look up, May 26, 2020, or 26, 27, 28. And that is when the George Floyd protests, or the protests in response to the death of George Floyd, began. And prior to the show, I looked up the approximate damage estimates vary, but they range from $1 billion to $2 billion in damage and arson and overall cost to the economy. So we've gone from cooperation at the beginning to selective enforcement, to politicians deliberately picking losers, not winners and losers, but losers. We are all suffering. We are all losing in one way or another. But here in California, the governor, and in Los Angeles, the mayor of Los Angeles and Los Angeles County of Supervisors have specified which groups will lose the most. In this case, restaurant owners. And we are going to be faced with, not just in California, but the country as a whole will be faced with a group of people who have lost everything. I've said this before, through no fault of their own. It's one thing to start a business, to assume maximum risk in the hope of maximum return. And if you don't succeed, no one says the government owes you anything. But if you are successful and you are competing, and by any measure of the quote unquote free market, you have won, and the government comes in and says, you shall cease to operate. It seems to me that at least when it comes to the law of eminent domain, seizure of property, the government has a constitutional right to recompense you. In this case, the government,
constitutional duty, I think.
Okay,
right.
Louis,
government has seized property without any just compensation.
Ben Stein, please.
I think there's a lot to that, and it's heart-rendering, as my wife would say. It is, and as Judah has pointed out to me many a time, I have the great privilege of speaking to him quite often, we don't even know to what extent restaurants or communal eating spread the disease. We don't know things about that. That's why I made that comment about taking the virus against the wall, slapping it against the wall. We don't know how it's spread. There's a lot of question about how it's spread. It's not clear to me that if you're at a restaurant and the people next door to you at the next table 4 or 5 feet away have the virus, that you're going to get it. It's not at all clear that if you do get it, that it'll be much worse than a cold. I mean, something's going on here where the powers that be grabbed hold of this virus and used it to just choke like a chicken the lifeblood of small business, at least here in our beloved Los Angeles and much of California, and have turned this wonderful, wonderful town into a ghost town. I've been to East Berlin, and I have to say, and I'm sure Louis will back me up on this because he lives near me in Beverly Hills. If you drive to Beverly Hills these days, it looks like East Berlin. It's very, very distressing.
I mean, on your block on weekends, you can't even park.
Well, that's because the police are afraid that people will demonstrate in favor of Trump and will protest the stealing of the election.
So even if businesses were to be open, which there still are in Beverly Hills,
oh yes,
there is certain limited amount of parking going on. I know,
well,
because
I've been buying Christmas presents for various important personages in my life. I've been in Beverly Hills a lot in the last week, and it's just it's astonishing. There are a lot of people walking up and down the street. Nobody's buying anything except me.
So if you were giving Trump advice in the beginning, would you have said to shut it down?
Oh, absolutely not. But I would have made it a point to be on TV constantly saying we're bigger than this. You know, a person who has done the incredible kindness of being my friend, Warren Buffett, likes to talk about how we've got through the Civil War, we got through the Great Depression, we got through the World War II. We can get through almost anything, but the media doesn't think we can get through something that is, for the great majority of the sufferers, not much worse than a cold. So the media has just grabbed this and choked the country with it.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. Please follow us on, I'll let Ben Boychuk tell people where to follow us. Ben Boychuk.
Like us on Facebook at The World According to Ben Stein. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're a new viewer, thank you for joining us. Subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get notifications about when we're going live and when the videos are up. And please let your friends, family know. You can get an audio version of this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and other platforms. And finally, most importantly, everybody get on Parler and follow us at Ben Stein.
And soon to be at The World According to Ben Stein on Parler too. We're going to be opening that page up fairly soon. It's a work in progress. I want to welcome everybody back. But Lewis actually raises a good point, like he always does, Ben Stein, I was talking to you about this before the show, is what is deemed essential, a word I absolutely hate. For some reason, that word really resonates with me, not in a good way. But we live in Hollywood, where actors are considered essential, where restaurants aren't. We live in a town where governors or mayors or city council people say to people, "Don't go somewhere. Do as I say, but not as I do." And it's very frightening that we're coming to a world, Ben, where people are deciding who's essential.
I know the Nazis believed that Jews were inherently lazy and made their money by cheating and stealing and defrauding, and therefore Jews, it was not essential that they be kept alive unless they could be used as slave laborers. And something about deciding who in California is essential and who's not essential reminds me a little bit too much of that. Just not a lot too much, just a little too much.
But also, Ben, the point I want to bring up of getting back to the finances, like what Lewis is saying, what you guys are all talking about, is people don't realize, okay, so if you own a bar or you own a restaurant, right? The odds are, as Lewis says, you're never coming back. And like you say, a lot of these restaurants aren't going back. But most bar and restaurant owners or salon owners don't own the establishment they're in. So they're at that same time paying a landlord. Now that landlord, for the most part, probably doesn't own that property in full. So they have to pay the banks. And I don't think people realize the full-on devastation, Ben, as you being an economist, that this is causing.
An economist and owner of a tiny bit of commercial property, nowhere near as much as Mr. Fine, but a tiny little bit. And I will tell you, if I may, that landlords are people too. They have families. They have children, grandchildren. They give money to charities and so forth. They're not all evil. They don't deserve to be killed. And but I think that's what they're doing. I mean, I could just see AOC making a list of people to be killed, and high on the list will be Jews and landlords.
Lewis.
True story, and I'm not making this up. My mother was a slumlord in the South Bronx. Her late father, for whom I'm named, he was Louis. I'm Lew. He was a furrier.
Like Farrakhan.
Exactly. I had a bean pie, as I always do. It's part of my pre-show ritual. So my maternal grandfather was a furrier, and the little money he saved, he invested in a apartment building on College Avenue in the Bronx. And when my mother, who was the youngest of four, was somehow charged with running this place where none of the tenants paid rent, when she showed up to collect rent, I must have been 4. She decided it would be a learning experience, I suppose, to bring me along. And
right.
Yes, when she knocked on, and I kid you not, her name was Mrs. Jenkins, on her door, to which we heard the sound of a brick smashing into, from the 5th or 6th floor of the building, into my mother's windshield. That's how the rent was paid. So that's my experience as a property owner. I think this country is going to need a Marshall Plan. And for the business owners, for the entrepreneurs, for all the people who have lost so much, again, through no fault of their own. And when the city, in this case, the city of Los Angeles, said, if you own a restaurant, you can't have indoor dining, but you can have outdoor dining, and people invested in the tables and the social distancing and the heat lamps, everything. They borrowed money. They did everything they were supposed to do. And then the city said, no, you can't do that. And these business owners went further and further into debt when they have no more money and they have no more credit, and they've maxed out their credit cards and they've exhausted their savings and their cash, and all they have left is their homes. Are the banks going to be so magnanimous as to say, we'll impose a moratorium? We'll work out something because you're good people and you've suffered an irreversible calamity. No. What is going to happen to these people aged, say, 55 to 75? There's no coming back for them.
Hey, I'm 76, so it doesn't apply to me.
I know.
Ben Stein, what say you? I was reading, there's a bar owner in Santa Monica that literally spent $250,000 to make his bar COVID acceptable, and all of a sudden another lockdown is going to put him out. Is the government, nobody's seeing any money anymore coming in.
Well, I hate to play devil's advocate here, but it's kind of interesting to me that this is happening, yet the stock market is skyrocketing. So I'm not quite sure what that's about, but I think it has to do with the fact that the investors think that this condition is permanent, and so tech is all that remains. Small business is being kicked in the teeth incredibly by the government of Los Angeles and the government of California, incredibly.
And by the way, this isn't just small business, so people understand, right? If you're a musician in a big band,
aren't you a musician?
Yeah, on the side. Ben and I have a band. What's it called? If you're you have to pay there's roadies are out of work. You have arenas that are empty. I mean, there is just so much going on. Ben Boychuk, how does it look on the mountain over there?
Tell it on the mountain.
It's confusing. And I spent some time today trying to figure out a few things, but I learned something interesting, Ben Stein, which may alarm you somewhat, because we've spent a lot of time, fretting a bit about the new rules in California, and then experiencing some relief that various county sheriffs, including now the Los Angeles County Sheriff, saying that they're not going to enforce compliance with a lot of these new rules coming from Gavin Newsom. But here's what I learned today. So in the LA County Sheriff's statement, he said, this isn't really for us to deal with. We're not going to enforce the rules on businesses. We'll concern ourselves with what they're calling super spreader events, like parties and things.
Party hardy.
Well, the sheriff may come and visit you, but then he said something that is a little bit frightening to me. He said, we're going to leave that to the health department and to the Bureau of Alcohol,
Tobacco and Firearms.
Alcohol and Beverage Control is the state agency. Now, I happen to know for a fact that the San Bernardino County Health Department is not really enforcing the rules up on this mountain, but the State Bureau of Alcohol Beverage Control is, and they're throwing down fines, 10 grand, and threatening to pull people's liquor licenses and things like that, which would be a death sentence. So on the one hand, people are, up here it's colder, people are struggling, they're trying to figure out, it's hard to do outdoor dining, but indoor dining is technically against the rules, so they're willing to risk incurring these fines that could be a death sentence for their businesses. So what would you say to somebody in that position?
I don't know what to say to them. It's a terrible, terrible situation, and I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I think science is highly political, and I would not trust what the scientists tell me. I mean, it's interesting. I worked on a movie a long time ago in which we questioned whether Darwinist evolution was possible, was logically possible. And a lot of people got very, very angry about me for questioning science. And I said, well, my relatives in Europe saw scientists pushing them into the gas chambers because they were genetically inferior. So I don't trust science at all.
Getting back to that, that's actually a great point, because all the scientists, which we're feeding into models, those are the same models that Al Gore probably used to tell us that in 12 years, what was this, about 25 years ago, we would no longer be around. And I really do believe it. I'll get back to it because, as you know, I my love of Trump, he truly made an enormous mistake with Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Yeah.
I
He
mean,
was a troublemaker. He was a troublemaker.
I mean, this guy has been on the wrong side of scientific history with, going back to the AIDS epidemic. And, we have a government bureaucrat that basically shut our country down and became the economist. Yeah, Louis.
I disagree with that. I think one of the few things that Joe Biden did that was, I suppose, unintentionally brilliant was blaming the president for the total number of deaths related to COVID. We have a federalist form of government. We have governors. And what I find most ironic is that the two states with the largest death counts, New York and California, are, for all intents and purposes, one-party states. The governor, the mayors of the two largest cities, New York City and Los Angeles, are Democrats. So either the states have autonomy and they are laboratories of democracy, or they're not. It's not to suggest that the president is free of criticism or is above criticism, but you can't have it both ways. And Ben Stein raised the point about this looking like East Berlin. I think it looks a lot more like East Tehran after the Israelis will have bombed it, at least where we live. But the point still stands that this is what isn't science is picking losers.
No, Louis, actually, by the way, you Ben, he really raises a good point right now without realizing what he just said, right? So you take the two biggest states right now that have the COVID deaths, right? And we let's get to crime. It's funny that the states that have the highest rate of gun control tend to have the highest rate of shootings.
Yes.
And the states that have the highest rate of COVID control
have the highest rate of COVID. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And the gun control thing we could easily explain. That's a racial thing. I mean, I know you're going to yell at me after the show and say I'm not allowed to say that, but that's a racial thing. But the COVID thing, well, that shows we don't know how to control it, but we do know so far it's nowhere near as deadly as we thought it was going to be.
Well, it's a lot more deadly because of what we know you shouldn't do, and we turned our backs on, and that is if you're going to densely pack people in streets to protest, and then riot and loot, and then you lie to people. You tomorrow is Pearl Harbor Day, okay? Here's the difference, the many differences between then and now, but one principal difference. And I say that corporate word, buy-in. During the Second World War, all of FDR's sons served in the military. All of Ambassador Kennedy's sons who could served in the military. Even little RFK served in his capacity. He was too young at the time, but he saw that his older brothers were involved and he wanted to enlist as well. You don't have that kind of buy-in. You have people saying, don't do these things in public. It's illegal. And then they race off to the fanciest restaurants. If you're Governor Newsom, the French Laundry, or you have someone who's a member of the LA County Board of Supervisors who says, if you dine outside, you are spreading the virus, and then goes and has a dinner outside. there's no sense of commitment or cooperation, or in the case of the mayor of Austin, Texas, issues an order from his condo in Cabo San Lucas.
That's great. I didn't know about that, Louis. I want to thank you for bringing that to my attention.
That's the difference.
It's horrifying. It's
I mean, FDR shamed his son-in-law, his daughter Anna. Her husband wasn't. I don't know if he was enlisted or not, but he wasn't serving in the same way FDR's sons were. And FDR made it very uncomfortable while in the presence of his son-in-law about that fact. And the so-called ruling class then, an aristocracy more of wealth than talent, was still more talented than today's so-called meritocrats.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. Ben Boychuk, will you please tell people the places they could find us?
Please like us on Facebook at The World According to Ben Stein. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you for watching right now. And if you're new, welcome.
Sure.
Please subscribe, hit that bell in the upper corner on the YouTube window, so you'll get all the announcements. You'll get notifications when we're live and when the videos appear. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. Or you can also get us on Stitcher and other very fine podcasting platforms. And of course, every one of you should be on Parler. And if you are, please follow us at Ben Stein.
I want to welcome everybody back to The World According to Ben Stein. And tonight we're discussing a lot, but one of the things, Ben, I haven't watched the show in almost 25 years. I don't think it's been funny in 25 years. But last night on SNL, on Saturday Night Live, and I only know this because I read it in Breitbart, during the weekend update segment, this jerk off named Pete Davidson, probably the world's most disgusting human, was doing his weekend update and started mocking and berating the people of his hometown of Staten Island, the bar owners that were complaining that they need to do their business. So a guy that was considered an essential worker, a guy for Saturday Night Live, was telling people that they should stay at home and not whine that they're about to lose their life savings. And people wonder why Hollywood is so hated.
I must say, you can't really know how much to hate it until you've worked it and had it rob you blind many times. But on the other hand, it's also made me rich. So I love it.
I thought you were poor.
I'm poor too.
But what are your thoughts on that, Ben? Isn't it just, I mean, it goes to what Louis just brought up, that there is this hypocrisy that's going on. And I don't get people that watch these people. I don't understand people that vote for these people.
It's not even remotely funny. It hasn't been funny forever.
But I mean, but again, we're voting. The people in Santa Monica right now that are going through this major crisis, they voted for the people that are shutting them down. And at a certain time, it's like they
don't know any better.
But
they don't know any better.
But part of the problem is their solution constantly is to change states and then vote the same way. And that state is in the same mess instead of staying in the state.
Sir, with the greatest possible respect, I have a very close relative who has been working since the moment Trump was inaugurated to get him out of office. She's a wealthy woman, close relative. She described herself as a member of the resistance, has been working like a mad woman to get Trump out, to get Biden in. And she wrote me an email I got 2 days ago saying, I'm beginning to wonder how friendly Biden is to Israel. I was laughing so hard I couldn't catch my breath. But as I say, this is a woman who's a prestige graduate of one of America's prestige colleges. People don't know any better. That's all I can say.
Ben Boychuk, since you brought it up to me today, I didn't realize the strip joints were open. But how much
joints are open?
Yeah,
some of them are.
Yeah, strip joints are open. So Ben Boychuk, we raised the point of strip joints are open, but synagogues and churches are closed.
Not anymore.
So as we know, the Supreme Court was it late last month it was late last month, ruled that Andrew Cuomo's decision to shut down churches and synagogues in New York City is unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court on Thursday issued an order basically telling the Ninth Circuit and a lower federal court, you'll correct me if I'm on the details of this, Louis, but basically sent a ruling back to the Ninth Circuit saying, in light of our decision in New York, you need to take another look at this case, this lawsuit against Governor Newsom.
Well, if I may say so, your humble servant, this fat old man sitting across from you, who may be poor or may be rich, you don't know, was the original first plaintiff in the state of California suing Newsom about the shutting down of houses of worship. This very old guy.
Well, so tell us more about that case. And
okay, we had to find my lawyer, a very clever fellow named Larry Klayman. I advise you to spend some time talking to him. Had to file the papers in Sacramento. I don't know why, but he had to. And the Sacramento courts were closed down because of COVID, so it hasn't even come before a judge yet. And we filed it in March.
And it's not going to be heard till March of 2028.
Is that right?
No, I mean, the way the courts are backed up and everything's closed down, it's Ben Blanchard.
Well, happily, this other suit has made progress. This particular case against Newsom, I'm not sure where it was filed, if it was in LA or San Francisco, but certainly the Supreme Court just had a few words to say about it. So that I take that to be good news. I have a question for you though, Ben Stein.
Yes,
We've been talking a lot about the hypocrisy of many of these, the rulers refusing to abide by their own rules. What do you think is worse, that hypocrisy or the sort of contempt that it instills in the populace that has to abide by these rules or be crushed?
I think the populace hates the ruling class like mad already. I think they hate the media class like crazy. I don't know who they don't hate, and they should hate all those people. All those people are just shitting all over them all the time, and then laughing about it and saying they're the spearhead of the revolution. I mean, the people I know who genuinely think of themselves as revolutionaries eat only a very, very expensive food and smoke only very expensive dope, and so they are hypocritical pieces of dirt, and they should be hated.
Louis, fine.
I can tell you one way this is going to end. It's not a joke. I can see organized crime coming to the rescue of small business owners, or strong arming the owners of some of these buildings, the landlords, and saying, "Listen, we're the new silent majority partner," and that's how these businesses will stay afloat. In many cases, you could see the equivalent of what we're. Or a resurgence of latter-day speakeasies. And on the other hand, and I say this with some measure of fear and anxiety, I could see a mini Waco happening in which a business owner says, as when law enforcement comes to shut down a bar or restaurant, because person now owes a $10,000 fine or something absurd like that. You push people into desperate circumstances. They may be forced to do desperate things. I am not endorsing that, but I am saying I would be remiss if I were to say that could not happen.
There's the falling down scenario.
Clive and Bundy may be the better
planning. Where I guarantee you, I know lots and lots and lots of gun owners who are talking about it already.
Yeah, Clive and Bundy may be the better analogy there, Louis.
Who's Larry Klayman also represents, oddly enough.
I want to find out.
Clive and Bundy was a rancher in Nevada who had a months-long standoff with the feds and prevailed.
Because of land grazing.
Because of
grazing rights.
Right.
And the reason I know this is because Larry Klayman is also his lawyer. Larry Klayman just represents us all. And but getting back to it, Louis raises a good point, and I this is something that the left gaslit their constituents for the better part of 8 to 9 months. right? Everything they accused the president of doing, being a dictator, he wasn't, gaslighting, all this stuff, they did it. They did it to win an election.
But they got away with it because the media is the judge.
That's exactly right. The one person who hasn't gaslit his constituency, and I say yet, is the president. I mean, when he gave his speech last night, I mean, and there's still thousands of people are going to hear him speak. I don't see, as Lewis brings up, a peaceful, easy ending.
That's a very sad situation. People have every right to be angry, although violence is always wrong.
No, violence is always wrong, but if you're put in a certain
situation,
situation,
wrong at all.
What?
Does he know, Air Doctor, does he know about the 13th Amendment?
Slaves?
The manservant you have.
He is.
Don't tell him.
Stop it, you jackass.
See, Lewis he's a troublemaker. That's right, Lewis. That's right. There are people like you. Anyway, I think there are the media has covered for all the troublemakers in this country. They've whipped up all the problems in this country. A friend of mine, a very smart young woman from China, interestingly enough, asked me just, I think it was just last night. She said, why did the media turn this way? What happened? And I said, I don't know, but it happened, I think, when FDR was, after he became president, because much of the media was hostile to the Democrats under FDR. But in the 50s, under Eisenhower, one of the best times in the country's history, the media just became wildly left-wing and just never stopped. But
I agree.
Let me ask you a quick question, Ben. I want to get everybody's opinion on this. I want the people in YouTube chat to get their opinion on this. When the vaccine comes out, will you take it?
Will I take it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Ben Boychuk?
Eventually, but not right away. No, because it's a different kind of vaccine. It's not a typical vaccine. It was developed from messenger RNA, so it's not like the traditional vaccines that are developed out of, basically they use dead forms of the virus. That's the reason why they were able to develop it so quickly. But I'm going to wait to see if, people's appendages start to fall off. And then once I'm fairly confident that they don't, then I'll get it.
Lewis?
I think eventually is the only reasonable answer, and I'll tell you why, without sounding like a conspiracy theorist, because I am not one. If you're a politician, why would you not ration this? I've said this before. Don Corleone, what I need is $1 million in cash and all those vaccines you carry in your pocket, like so many nickels and dimes. If you're a politician and you're someone in power, why would you not ration this very good point, very slowly?
Very good point. Very good point. Very good point. The solid, reliable Democrat voters will get it first.
Yeah. And he also raises another point is that the UK, right, which says they have a vaccine ready to go, has also basically said we're going to be shut down for the next year. So which one is it? Is the vaccine going to work, and you're still going to do a shutdown for a year? I mean, there is no end in sight for these politicians, Ben, in power.
It's a very scary situation. I'm scared all the time. That's why I have my man who works for me to protect me.
But have you ever seen this type of political grab in your lifetime?
No, I under Watergate it happened, but it was nowhere near as extensive as this. Yes, they kicked out a fabulously effective president, but they did not seize power all over the country by having its political coup coincide with an illness, possibly a fake illness coup. So I've never seen a power grab like this in this country, except during the Civil War, so-called Civil War, really war between the states, when Lincoln did a power grab that was even worse.
By the way, everybody in our chat basically said, no, they are not taking the vaccine. Ben Boychuk, you're definitely the one that doesn't do the first upgrade on your phone. Lewis, I mean, there's so many variables, Ben Stein, in this vaccine. And it's like, if you're going to say, again, let's just use our brains for a second. If you're going to say we're going to give it to the elderly first, again, the elderly, if we knew who this was affecting, we did know who this was affecting the most, this shouldn't even have been a question. The elderly should have been at home while the rest of us, like NFL players, I know I'm none of us are in NFL player, ready condition, not anymore. We used to be, all of us. We know who's safe. So this whole thing with the vaccine at Ben Stein, it just seems like sort of a redundant thing.
I know the whole thing is incredibly confusing. Why, if we're having this great vaccine come out any day now, do we need to have this gigantic shutdown? I don't understand at all. Why is an incredibly advanced country like the United Kingdom going to be effectively shut down for a year? I don't understand. I don't know. I just don't understand. There's so much going on that I don't understand.
And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the point. So much is going on that we can't, you can't keep your eye on the ball. And if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. Ben Boychuk, please tell people where they could find us.
Thanks, man.
Sorry. You can like us on Facebook. Well, you don't want to hear me, coughing.
We do want to hear you.
Like us on Facebook at The World According to Ben Stein. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that bell, get notifications when we're live and when the videos show up. Get the audio version of this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and other fine podcasting platforms. And above all, most importantly, if for some reason you're not on Parler, or if you are, you got to follow us at Ben Stein.
I want to welcome everybody back to The World According to Ben Stein. Somebody in the YouTube channel has a question for you, Ben, a Nixon question.
Yeah,
that I will allow you to answer, even though Lewis is officially the Nixon Trivia King. Why did Nixon take us off the gold standard?
The gold standard had outlived its usefulness, and we wanted to be able to create as much money as we wanted in order to inflate the economy and keep the economy moving. And I might add, if I may, was my sainted father, Herbert Stein, who was chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors at that time, who was in charge of that, which was called Phase 1. Phase 1, in which Doris gets her oats. And so that was done to free monetary policy.
So your father is a famed economist. Now I'm curious.
Yes.
What do you think?
I'm sorry to say.
What do you think? Who, God rest his soul, an amazing man who saved Israel's economy, helps with our economy. What do you think he would have said as Dr. Anthony Fauci became the top economist in our country?
I think he would have said, "I don't trust economists and I don't trust science. I believe in Beatles."
Yes, Lewis.
Can I give the Sam Kinison response to Professor Stein's answer about the gold standard?
As long as you don't scream it.
No, I won't scream it. It's because the system created by Bretton Woods, which established the gold standard and the dollar as the reserve currency, there was a run on gold, and that's why we switched to floating exchange rates.
Well, we could have solved that problem by just raising the price of gold.
Well, the problem was foreign governments wanted the physical bars of gold, and
we could have instead of $35 for each ounce, it's going to now be $500 an ounce. That would have solved that problem.
But we imposed wage and price controls.
I'm going to tell you I was trying to tell you a funny story.
Please go ahead.
So at that time, Governor Connolly was I believe, Secretary of the Treasury. And the problem that you correctly bring up is that the Belgians had a large amount of dollars and wanted them converted to gold. And Nixon said to Connolly, what will you do if the Belgians absolutely demand gold for their dollars? And Connolly said, I'll take that little Belgian fellow and I'll kick the shit out of him. And so instead of doing that, they took us off the gold standard.
Well, I think the moral is don't put Texans in charge of the Treasury. Connolly and then James Addison Baker III, who
kind of character.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I think, you know,
vastly overrated.
but I think, you know,
not by me.
No, Jim Baker.
No, not vastly overrated by me.
Ben, I was saying to you the other day, the great speaker lie is, this is my last story. And, you know, this is the last thing I'm going to share. And I've noticed that with the government, the great lie over the last 8 months is, you know, they keep, you know, this is, you know, we're going to do this to to flatten the curve. We're going to come out with the vaccine and people are going to be, and I realized that they have zero benchmarks. This is like every day, Ben, they wake up and they flip a coin in the air and they go, this is the decision I'm going to make today. I'm going to close up this, or I'm going to do that. They're literally.
Yeah, they don't know what they're doing. I was telling you before the show, my father is the finest man I've ever known in my life. But he would have been the first to say, economists have no idea what they're doing, and economists know very little about the economy. And I think similarly, virologists and epidemiologists know very little about pandemics.
So what would you say to these people? I mean, like, just what would you say to these scientists, these economists? Because Ben, people
say, shut up.
But they're not the ones in power. Our elected officials are the ones who are making these decisions.
I tell them to shut up too.
Yeah, but Louis, this is where I actually disagree with you. They are making up. You know, it's like at the end of the day, Joe Biden picks somebody.
Can you imagine Joe Biden is in charge of the health of America? Can you imagine anything crazier than that? Joe Biden, one of the stupidest people ever to hold national office, is in charge of the health of America. It's unbelievable.
Who picks somebody getting back to who's essential, that people that are of the age of 75 are no longer essential to to living, Ben Boychuk.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm very excited about the next year. Yeah, I just want to dissent slightly. I don't think they're flipping coins or making stuff up. They have benchmarks. It's just that they're impossible to reach. You know, I mean,
they don't follow them.
It reminds me of another fact of history that I think my friend Mr. Louis Stein will know, which is that when the Germans in 1940 invaded France, the French high command was in a chateau outside of Paris that had no telephones and no radios. And they would send their orders out to the troops by motorcycle, and they would draw halt lines on maps requiring that the Germans halt at this line. Germans didn't read the lines.
It's because they were in French.
Ah, good point.
By the way, people of a certain age, if you ever meet them, Frenchmen of a certain age, it's a mystery. They all fought in the resistance. If you meet a Frenchman,
I know,
but with so many people.
But two things about France during the war. After the evacuation of Dunkirk, the French held off the Germans from advancing farther with some of the most heroic rearguard actions in the history of warfare. That's not a joke. They're unbelievably brave. Second thing is, once the Germans had occupied France, they governed France, a country of very approximately 50 million, with about 5,000 soldiers and police. All the rest was done by the local French authorities.
Well, here's something for you. Speaking of that, do you know it took the Nazis longer to crush the Warsaw Ghetto uprising than it did to invade, conquer, and occupy France?
I'm sure that's true. Yeah, I'm sure that's true.
It is true.
And we are going all esoterical on people tonight. Yes, I know that's not a word. But I have a question for everybody, including in the YouTube chat, since we all believe Biden is a fraudulent president, and God willing, the Supreme Court will miraculously do something good for us.
As they always do.
And it's quite funny. Do you see Biden ever getting into office?
I think he'll get into office. I
don't mean no. Do you think he'll be alive? Is my question.
No, you mean physically unassisted on his own?
Yeah. Do you
yes,
think?
I think he will, and I think he will do a fabulous job, and he'll be elected to a second term. And I would guess that Mrs. Harris will resign and will decide to take up a job as provost of Stanford.
Ben Boychuk, I ask you that question too.
I mean, yeah. Look, barring some 11th.
No,
hour
I'm not
come from
talking
behind-
right now. I'm going all conspiratorial. I'm not talking about barring this or barring that. Like Ben brought up last week, the dog accident. Okay.
Oh, the broken foot thing.
the broken foot thing.
Yeah. He'll take the question then should be, is he going to take the oath of office in January?
Yes.
Yes, he'll take the oath of office in January. Or his android substitute will take the oath of office.
His hologram.
He is the android substitute. He is the android substitute.
His
Maybe.
hologram. What about you?
Here's a question. How do you have an inauguration outdoors during a pandemic in a winter that has in the past killed at least one president who took the oath of office and then dropped dead a few weeks later? So I'd like to know because Ronald Reagan's second inaugural was not held outdoors because of the severe winter. I want to know if Biden's will be held indoors. You'll see some delayed video of him taking the oath, and that's it.
That's right. I bet you're exactly right. I was at JFK's inaugural. It was effing freezing. And boy, I wouldn't go to another one outdoors.
By the way, said bye-bye to Twitter raises a great point. Kamala Harris has not resigned yet from the Senate.
Oh, that's very funny. I bet if she resigned, we'd get a Republican senator here in California.
Yeah.
Well, no,
Yeah. There is literally zero risk of why hasn't she resigned yet?
That's a very good question. That's a very, very good question. Well, she probably gets I'm getting some bump in her pension for staying on a little longer.
I don't know. Something tells me that's a vote of confidence in our voting system.
You know, it is. I mean, said bye bye to Twitter. It raises a very interesting question. Ben Boychuk. I mean, I don't remember the last time a senator who was our last senator for vice president?
Well,
Joe Biden.
Yeah, well, that's right. I'm not sure when he resigned, but I very quickly went to look when Barack Obama resigned his Senate seat in 2008, and it was November 16th, 2008.
Well, there's your answer. It was after the electoral. No,
I bet Mrs. Harris is too busy working.
Yeah, she's too busy helping the state of California.
Right.
She's upstairs at Shea Stein.
and it is our Sunday night special. Ben is taking a trip this week, but we will be resuming as Ben is taking on Mr. Stein goes to Washington. And he's staying. Should I tell people where you're staying? That's pretty cool.
I'm home at the Watergate.
That you're staying at the Watergate, where you have a place at the Watergate, even though that must evoke. Doesn't that evoke some sort of strange, bad feelings? Not really.
The bad feeling is because my mother and father used to live there, and my mother would walk me to the elevator when I left to come back to California, and she would follow behind me and wave goodbye to me as I got into my car to go to the airport. And I still find it very heart-rendering, as my wife would say, to be in that hallway without her.
But we will wish you a bon voyage and a healthy and happy trip. I want to get to some of the people though in the because they have actually some very funny things that are I can't read right now, but because I'm having a hard time with my YouTube screen. So Ben Boychuk, Feel free.
Well, feel free to do what?
To the YouTube screen.
I don't have it open. I figured you were up to it.
Thanks for the backup.
Oh, you're welcome. This is a total. Well, we're falling apart in the last 3 minutes of the show.
No, we're having a great time and we're telling the truth. We're telling the truth. The country was robbed.
Yeah.
It's still being robbed. We have a media/academic left-wing conspiracy that has stolen the election and stolen power from the people. And I don't see any end to it. And the next time you hear about me may well be that I've been run over while jogging in Beverly Hills at night.
And Ben has hidden all his valuables in advance of his trip, though he does trust the people that work for him.
And on that note, I want to thank everybody in our YouTube chat tonight. We had a lot of fun. We will let you know as soon as we do, and Ben will be remotely potting from Washington, D.C. Of course, I want to thank Mr. Esoteric himself, Louis Fine. Of course, I want to thank again managing editor of American Greatness, Ben Boychuk. You could find Louis Fine at L Fine on Parler. Ben, please tell people where they could find you, because I never.
bboychuk3 on Parler. That's BBOYCHUK numeral 3 on Parler. And check out American Greatness at www.amgreatness.com.
And of course, check out spectator.org, where Ben puts in his daily diaries, and you can find them at Ben Stein on Parler. I want to thank everybody out there that's been listening to us and supporting us. It means the world to us. Follow us, like us, tell your friends. And of course, let's thank America's humble servant, of course, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. We salute you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.
That's the 1984 symbol. I know. I recognize that.
Very good.